Hi, good afternoon and welcome. Thank you all for joining us today on what is a gorgeous day in Brussels here. DEKRA is hosting this webinar to discuss a safe road to a hydrogen future, and we have a fully packed agenda for the next hour. We will first be welcomed in just a minute by the head of Global External Affairs and Public Policy at DEKRA. Then we'll hear from the EU institutions, both the Parliament and the Commission, on the EU hydrogen agenda. And after this, the Secretary General of Hydrogen Europe will set the scene for us and overview the risks along the path to decarbonization. We'll hear a little bit more in detail about what is needed to become hydrogen ready. And finally, we'll hear an industry perspective on hydrogen. And at the end of these presentations, we hope to have time for a discussion with you. So please send your questions throughout the sessions in the box that you see on your live stream link. We'll raise some of those questions in our final session, and we will follow up in writing if we don't have time to respond to all of your queries. So let's get started with our hour. I would like to first warmly welcome Oliver Dieters, after all that, who's the head of Global External Affairs and Public Policy at DEKRA. Thanks for starting us off.
Thank you, Sarah. I'm pleased to welcome you all here at our today's webinar. To cut it short, as you all know, clean hydrogen is a perfect means towards a goal of climate neutrality. It can power heavy industries, propel our cars, trucks, planes, store seasonal energy, and heat up our homes. All of this with almost zero emissions, to quote Commission President von der Leyen. Now, the deployment of clean hydrogen goes hand in hand with considerable safety considerations, such as safety standards and technology specifications. These are a precondition to an effective pan-European rollout of hydrogen. That is why DEKRA, as a global leader of safety and inspection services, is hosting this webinar. We would like to provide a platform to discuss the necessary elements to build up a safe road to hydrogen future. Thus, we are pleased to welcome our panelists from EU institutions, Mrs. Bentele specific, and of course the colleagues from industry and as well our audience, either in office or at home office. We hope for a good and interactive discussion, and let's get the ball rolling. Sarah, the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you, Oliver.
Thank you.
So we're going to start off our discussion today with the EU perspective, and as you said, we're fortunate enough to be joined by Member of Parliament Hildegard Bentele. We will also be joined by Ruud Kempener, who is a policy officer in DG Energy at the European Commission. I want to thank you both for being with us today. We'll kick off this part of the discussion on the hydrogen agenda with a short video, and then we'll hand the floor to Mrs. Bentele. Thank you.
Never before in Europe have we seen such a level of interest about hydrogen as we have today.
Clean hydrogen is one of the top priorities in our energy transition, and we will be investing a lot in making clean hydrogen part of our energy mix in the future.
Hydrogen is a vital missing piece of the puzzle to help us reach this deeper decarbonization and to reach it at a lower cost to people.
It's got huge potential. Europe leads this, if we invest well and we bring all the efforts at the European scale together, we will stay world leaders.
In my home country, Germany, hydrogen is the talk of the country amongst industry and energy experts. There are big hopes to decarbonize production in the prominent steel and ammonia and cement industry, and many attempts to create hydrogen clusters and to produce electrolyzers which are more and more powerful. Germany is hosting the most dense network of refueling stations in Europe, and Mercedes-Benz just recently split its branch for heavy-duty vehicles to free the way for hydrogen drives. The German government and the federal states are also investing heavily in a variety of promising research projects, and soon, right before the gates of my constituency, Berlin, Europe's first underground pure hydrogen storage will be established. I was therefore thrilled to be the rapporteur for the Environment Committee's opinion on the EU's hydrogen strategy, which gave me the opportunity to dive deeper into the topic and learn about the great potential, but also the concerns on hydrogen. But let's look at the potential before we look at the concerns, shall we? I would like to give you 3 numbers that experts have calculated with a view to 2050, our climate neutrality target year. 129 million. 33.5 billion and 490,000. These numbers represent the great potential of hydrogen technology. 129 million tons of CO2 emissions that can be reduced every year. 33.5 million euro of gross value added could be generated every year, and 490,000 jobs could be created. Therefore, it's no surprise, especially not against the background of national hydrogens being developed not only in my country, but also in various other member states across Europe, that the majority of the European Parliament welcomes the Commission strategy and wants to officially comment on it with a plenary vote currently scheduled in April. However, as it is the case with many things in life, the devil is always in the detail. The manifold possibilities of the use of hydrogen are, of course, also raising concerns within one or other group or nation or region. And these concerns are subject to intense internal discussions and further on reflected, in my opinion, in the Environmental Committee in January and by a variety of amendments to the draft report in the leading industry committee. On the environmental aspects, the Environmental Committee had a solid majority on 6 key points. First, we need to be ambitious, especially as regards the expansion of infrastructure and renewable energy production. Carbon pricing will be crucial. Second, we need to aim at green hydrogen, but acknowledge low-carbon hydrogen during a limited transition period, especially to enable CO2 reduction in heavy industries. Third, we need to remain neutral towards all technologies. Yes, hydrogen can play an important role, but we need to be smart and keep in mind costs and efficiency, as well as local and regional circumstances, especially when it comes to energy storage and infrastructure. Fourth, we need to create a level playing field for hydrogen in many ways. State aid, legislation on renewables, blending, ETS, also European trading system, temporary incentives, just to name a few. Fifth, we need to think the hydrogen economy on a global scale and include hydrogen into the EU's international partnerships, as we will clearly need to rely on imports at least to a certain percentage. Sixth, we need to agree on security standards and recycling rules for raw materials used in electrolyzers and fuel cells. In addition, we need to ensure the safety of our regional water supply. Today, I cannot predict the outcome of the final vote in 2 months' time, but I do also not tell you anything new when I mention the topics currently discussed controversially. The use of low-carbon hydrogen, the role of CCS and CCU, and of nuclear power, costs and efficiency, quotas for green hydrogen, the sectors in which we will apply hydrogen, technology neutrality, additionality, and blending. However, I am personally convinced that hydrogen will make its contribution to the transformation of our energy systems and to the decarbonization of industry and transport. The success or failure of the establishment of a hydrogen economy will depend very much on the speed and the support we will give to it, since only scaling effects will make hydrogen also commercially competitive. Thank you, Sarah.
Thank you. Ruud, would you like to just come in?
Thank you very much. We've been, of course, in close collaboration with the European Parliament. Since it's, of course, already almost 9 months ago that we published a hydrogen strategy, which was in July 2020. I want to kind of continue where Ms. Bentele just ended, which is the scale-up. because indeed that is what the hydrogen strategy aimed to do. When we launched the hydrogen strategy in July 2020, we did that alongside a strategy on energy system integration. The idea here is that hydrogen is a part of a large portfolio of policies that we can and we need to use in order to get to a decarbonized energy system in 2050. So that portfolio includes issues like indeed scale-up of renewables, which is mentioned, energy efficiency, electrification, and also a whole range of renewable fuels and low-carbon fuels, which we will need for that. So why did we decide that we needed also to have a separate hydrogen strategy? That is exactly where we just left off. It's the scale-up. Hydrogen is currently being used, mostly in industry, but it's fossil-based. If we want to kind of increase the role of hydrogen in a decarbonized energy system, of course, it needs to be clean. It can be done by renewable energy, or indeed, as was just mentioned, and what the hydrogen strategy identified, it can also be done by capturing the CO2 associated with the current production of fossil-based hydrogen. The hydrogen strategy identified 3 phases. A first phase, which we're currently in, and which kind of goes alongside the current Commission's timeline, and that is that we want to achieve 6 gigawatts of electrolyzers by the end of 2024. Here, of course, in order to achieve that, we need to rapidly scale up because we're only in the megawatts, and we're talking in the gigawatts. So we're talking about a 100-fold increase. That 100-fold increase we see happening in the first instance in those places where hydrogen is already being used today, and that is indeed in industry. There's also links, of course, to another topic which was just mentioned in the introduction, safety. Industry has been working with hydrogen for many, many years. They've built hydrogen pipelines. They're using it in a range of processes. So there we have experience with the use of hydrogen. However, that's not sufficient. So in the hydrogen strategy, we're talking about a second phase, which is in the period up to 2030. And this is where we already see another kind of step change in terms of the hydrogen consumption and production in Europe, where we want to move from the 6 gigawatts, which we have by the end of 2024, to 40 gigawatts by 2030, and about 10 million tons of renewable hydrogen production by the end of 2030. That scale up requires also that we have to look at new processes, new industrial processes where hydrogen can be used, and the steel sector is one of those sectors which is very actively looking at that, but also to look at other applications in, for example, the transport sector, where heavy duty transport or long distance transport can be decarbonized with the use of hydrogen. Here we have already some experience, and indeed Germany is leading in terms of the development of hydrogen refueling stations, but we also need to scale up to application areas where we haven't been that active, in particular indeed in the heavy duty, in the long distance transport, but also slowly already start to look at the aviation and maritime sectors where indeed hydrogen can also play a role in the decarbonization. Another important aspect there is that if we want to scale up to the 40 gigawatts, we cannot rely on the 1,500 kilometers of pipelines which we have today, but we have to look at other ways to transport that hydrogen in a safe manner. Here we're closely working together with for example, the infrastructure companies which are looking at options to either develop new hydrogen pipelines or repurpose existing pipelines. Actually, one of the follow-up activities of the hydrogen strategy is a proposal which we have put in place at the end of last year in December, where we're providing a framework, a regulatory framework for the support for cross-border hydrogen pipelines, for storage associated with cross-border hydrogen, as well as support for the scale-up of hydrogen electrolyzers connected to the electricity grid. We are also looking, and this will come out in the summer of this year, to look at different rules and regulations which we can put in place to not only support the production of hydrogen, but also the demand of hydrogen. And indeed, there we're looking at ways to increase the demand for hydrogen, for example, in industrial processes, but also by those sectors which cannot be decarbonized, as well as the role of hydrogen in managing an renewables-based electricity system. Now, the third phase is in the period after 2030. If we're talking about the 10 million tons in 2030, that is still a fraction of what we would need under any scenarios for 2050. And again, there it's critically important that we continue to learn from our experience and to lead. Ms. Bentele just mentioned the international aspect of the hydrogen strategy, and that is absolutely clear. We need to make sure that in all of these steps, we continue to lead, that we develop an ecosystem, not only the electrolyzers, not only the infrastructure, but an ecosystem which includes safety to enable the scale up across the different scales, and then move with that and be ambitious and be that the region in the world which can achieve this climate neutrality objective, the first, ensuring industrial competitiveness across the full value chain. So with that, I'm handing it back to you. Thank you very much.
Great. Thank you. Thank you very much to both of you for providing a bit of an overview of the EU perspective as well. And I think, Ruud, building up on the scale-up, you've underscored how important it is to look at hydrogen as part of this decarbonization and achieving the EU Green Deal as well, and making those links to safety and the EU actually being a model for the region, which I think is in line very much with the forward-thinkingness of the Green Deal as well. So pushing those together. So thank you both. I hope we'll have time to come back to you as well in the Q&A, because I know there are already questions coming in. So I will move ahead in the presentations, and we hope to speak with you again for the end. Thank you both. Okay, I will now turn to Jorgo Chazimarkakis to overview some of the challenges ahead in these three phases that Ruud has already overviewed for us. Jorgo, thanks for joining us. Jorgo is the Secretary General of Hydrogen Europe, and we're pleased to have you with us today.
Many thanks for the invitation, and congratulations also to DEKRA and to Oliver Deiters to have organized this webinar, which is quite important. We have heard from Hildegard the views of the European Parliament. Ruud just really described the hydrogen strategy, so I don't need to do it. What we see is that hydrogen has become real and systemic. So 1 year ago, if you would have talked about hydrogen, it was a niche, a science fiction thing. Now it can be regarded already as the other leg of the energy transition, and I would add also the industry transition and the mobility transition. How does this translate into real doing? The hydrogen strategy foresees one element, one tool to implement all this. That's the European Clean Hydrogen Alliance. You can see here the nice logo of this alliance with over 1,000 members in the meanwhile. And this European Clean Hydrogen Alliance will take care of 6 parts of the value chain, from production to dissemination and then to the use of hydrogen in mobility, in buildings, in the energy system, and in industry. And these 6 round tables need somehow to stay coherent. That's the job that my association, Hydrogen Europe, tries to do together with other associations from the renewable sector, car sector, chemical and industry sector and heating sector. And you see, this is a very collaborative partnership approach. There is no silver bullet, but hydrogen can be regarded as an enabler of other technologies. Yeah, I would say to shine, to become even more efficient in their niche or in their system. The other instrument is the IPCEI instrument, the Important Projects of Common European Interest, IPCEI. German government is coordinating this process, and it has been launched by Minister Altmaier 17th of December. Here we will see big projects to be engineered, and all this will be done this year. During 2021, both the European Clean Hydrogen Alliance, with the task to deliver a project pipeline, and the IPCEI with the task to see how you can relax state aid rules in order to fund these projects. This will happen all this year. The engineering, basically also the notification by DG Competition, end of the year. And then it starts. The implementation will start as of 2022. And we think that we need 3 years to ramp up the demonstrators. Ruud just mentioned the figures, 6 gigawatt or 1 million ton of renewably produced hydrogen. It is ambitious, but absolutely doable if we definitely stick to our plan. And then we have 3 years of ramping up, of creating pilots, demonstrators. At the same time, we need in parallel to develop a market perspective, a hydrogen market design in order to see these demonstrators to have a long life, to do the disruption and to go from a fossil-based economy into a zero-emission economy. And here we have one issue. If we create these markets, we need to take care of the carbon content of hydrogen. Carbon content will be the new currency. And this needs to be certified. This needs to be clear from the origin of hydrogen until the trade and until the use of hydrogen. So basically every ton of hydrogen will have a tag. And this tag says the carbon content is this and that. Clean hydrogen will be defined based on a taxonomy of the European Commission. So there will be a threshold that we don't know yet. It's also part of a political discussion. That's why I was very curious to hear what Hildegard is saying, what the Parliament will be saying about this. So there will be a threshold, how much you need to decarbonize in order to have qualified for clean hydrogen. And clean hydrogen will be the new commodity. It will be a commodity that will be traded worldwide. And we as Europeans have now the situation and have now the challenge to create such a system that certifies the cleanliness of hydrogen. And here I see big steps to be taken and big opportunities for DEKRA. DEKRA is a global leader in certification schemes. DEKRA could lead us and help us to create such a guarantee of origin system. We have created in the hydrogen world a certification scheme which is called CertifHy, H-Y in the end. It's a robust system that can trace and track where hydrogen comes from. But we need to add other T's, so tracing, tracking, trading, tradability, transparency. The fifth T is trust. We want to create a system with trust. Why am I saying that? Hildegard and Oliver know these examples very well. In Germany, we have used certificates of origin from Austria and from Norway to, let me say, greenwash lignite-based electricity. This is legally possible, so it's not a criminal act, but it's of course not something we want. We want in the hydrogen sector to have a dedicated market, so a distinct market. That's my clear my clear message also to Hildegard for the Parliament. So we don't want to be part of the gas or the electricity market. Pure hydrogen needs to have distinct market rules, but that needs clear schemes of certification. And here's where DEKRA comes in. So summing up, we will see big disruptions in the energy system, in the industrial use. So this week an announcement of Liberty Steel to install 1 gigawatt in Dunkirk, in the north of France, together with Saarstahl, together with other players, European players, and to decarbonize steel within the next 10 years. Absolutely interesting to see. And also in the mobility sector, there will be disruptive changes. We will have a lot of safety issues. The pipelines need to be built. The pipelines need to be certified. Everything will be new, and DEKRA has a lot of work. We invite DEKRA to do this job along the whole value chain, and we would be happy to help in this process and to see DEKRA as one of the key players. Thanks very much for organizing this, and welcome.
Okay, Jorgo, maybe I can ask you to expound a bit on two areas, if it's okay. Thank you for the overview. You talked about guaranteeing the origins of hydrogen. Maybe you want to expound a bit on that and maybe talk about why we need a Clean Hydrogen Act.
Well, first of all, what we need is to have a guarantee that the hydrogen has a renewable or a massively decarbonized origin. We are talking about a threshold of up to 90%. So you can decarbonize hydrogen 60%, but 90% will be the threshold that will qualify for clean. And here you need somebody who certifies this process. We believe that the best would be to have one single authority that overlooks this process. It could be a company, it could be a body like DEKRA doing the job, but it should report to one authority in order to reduce the complexity, in order to make it simple and transparent. That's number one. The second is we need to embed this possibility of certification schemes into regulatory aspects. It is a regulatory aspect how we deal with clean hydrogen. At the moment, we have a scattered landscape of regulation when it comes to hydrogen. What we need is a better structuring, and a Hydrogen Act would not be a single piece of legislation, but it would be an umbrella that encompasses all the relevant aspects that make the hydrogen economy, the use of hydrogen, fly. So this is what we just start to discuss also with the Commission, of course, also with the Parliament, how to make it possible that there is a legal certainty in order to invest into hydrogen as an enabler of a zero-emission economy. Thank you very much for your question.
No, thank you, because I think all those certainties are what support the scale-up. I think one of the obvious questions, and I'm sure we'll come back to it, is the time frame. And I think it was Ruud who talked about the also implementation and scale of not only the supply, but the demand and how we do that. So thank you very much for opening up some of these wider topics and leading us. I think now we will turn to more about what we specifically need to do to be hydrogen ready. And to do this, we'd like to invite Joakim Wikeby, who's the Executive Vice President of the Service Division of Industrial Inspections at DEKRA. Joakim joins us as well remotely to talk a bit more about those next steps. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you, Sarah. Thank you. And I'm calling from Sweden, in the north of Europe. And just to connect back to the other speakers before me, that things are happening very quickly in the hydrogen scene at the moment. 2 days ago, it was announced that there will be a new started company in north of Sweden, actually, called the H2 Green Steel, and it's supposed to create decarbonized steel, because steel is one of the most heavy producers of CO2, and so steel is a very important aspect when it comes to this. And there is a lot of course, hydropower and also wind power in north of Sweden. So this is it's fitting well, and also it's quite interesting to see that because who would invest in steel industry a couple of years ago, and now we look at the hydrogen scene and the steel industry going together, and actually the Spotify founder of Spotify is also investing in this company. So it's happening a lot, and it's very interesting to see. So please switch slide. So as I said, I'm leading the industrial inspections at DEKRA, and I'm based in Sweden, and we have a couple of service business lines in our portfolio, and we are a global company, and you can switch to the next slide. I can show you a little bit about DEKRA, what we are. So we are a so-called TIC company, testing and inspection and certification company, and we are independent player. We are a third-party company, and we're also an association, not on the stock market. So we are providing safety solutions, which is of course important in the H2 world also. And we have around 40,000 employees in the world. We are in 50 countries, and we are generating a revenue of almost 3.5 billion euros. So we are a pretty stable company, and also during the pandemic times, now in the Corona times, we last year had the very stable financials also. And I think it shows that the safety is important, and the customers are willing and to invest in these safety issues. And so it was a pretty okay year for us last year, which I think it's a good sign. So we have this, let's say, statement that we want to be a global partner for a safe world, and we look at different parts of the let's say society, on the road and the work at home, to really build on these solutions in all aspects in the society. So next, please. So here you see a very simplified supply chain or value chain from the H2 business, and you can see in the bottom right that there are different examples on green power generation, the wind power, hydropower, solar or biogas. Then of course the electrolysis, and then comes the very important step in hydrogen. It's the storage, because as you all know that the renewables are a bit we are a little bit connected to the, let's say, Mother Nature when it comes to when the energy is created. So to be able to store hydrogen is really important, of course. And then you see the other, in this middle of the picture, the different pipelines, which we'll come back to later, but it's really an important part of the transformation to this green energy, using the pipelines and the existing pipelines that we already have in the system. And then you see the mobility, industry, commercial, different power plants to actually also produce electricity again to the household. And we see from DEKRA, we can provide services in all these phases from the planning and operation, from the planning into the construction and to the operations. So we have different service packages for this. So next, please. So I think we have identified one of the most, let's say, public, one of the most, let's say, connections to the public is actually filling stations and these kind of things where, and of course also industries close to the public, and this must be safe. And we cannot allow accidents to happen because it has to do with the public acceptance, and we have a couple of accidents happened previously that is not, of course, good in this sense. So here our recommendation is to utilize some European qualification framework when it comes to training, because we see that in one of these cases it was actually a wrongly mounted valve that was actually creating this explosion actually. And it's really, as I think Hildegard said before, it's the devil is in the detail. So here our recommendation from DEKRA is to actually look at this qualification scheme for operators and for installation companies to ensure this safety to the public. Next, please. So coming back to the pipeline topic that was discussed before. Here you see a picture of the existing pipeline network that we have today. And to realize the Green Deal and the Paris Agreement, we need to utilize the existing pipeline network to quite a big extent. So some calculations say above 75% of the existing pipelines need to be reused, and they are normally transporting natural gas. And this is it's a timing issue also too, because there are, as also Ruud was explaining before, there are different, of course, time perspectives in this, and it takes time to develop these kind of complex systems. So here, to be able to do this, we recommend that we need to look at harmonized standards to use these retrofit pipelines. And here we think also the EU and the European Commission can play a role to take this on, because there are many companies working on these kind of constructions and also to do the inspections, and it makes sense to have common standards, because physics are global, and they are how the hydrogen is treating the different materials are of course same. So we should learn a lot by having the same standards across Europe at least. So next, please. And this is my last slide, and it goes in the same direction, but a little bit more in details in the technical area, because as you may know, the difference between transporting hydrogen in these pipelines and natural gas, it's quite big when it comes to how it affects the materials in the pipelines, because hydrogen has between 5 and 15 times more. It's 5 to 15 times more dangerous, let's say, to make it easy for the material. So it means that in these high pressures, we talk about 80 bars and so on in these pipelines, it's the material gets more. It gets more brittle. It gets more. If you have cracks in the material, the pipeline, the cracks can grow faster compared to natural gas. And here we see that that there is a very important thing, and that is to set up not only harmonized across Europe, but also actually do this R&D work and research work when it comes to defining these targets and these standards for the material, which cracks are acceptable from a safety point of view, and what should we look at when we do these inspections from inside in these pipelines, which, by the way, also it's not so easy, because you need to have these systems to go into the pipelines and check this. And here also we have the let's say the idea to recommend to the European Commission to initiate or install some kind of research group to really define these targets, because we all want to reuse the existing pipelines in the network because of timing, of course, because we want to really do this in time, but also from cost point of view, because it's 5 to 10 times, of course, more expensive also to build new pipelines completely. So therefore, this is extremely important to realize this transition to H2 economy and energy. So that was all for me. Thank you.
Great. Thank you very much, Joakim. So we'll turn now to our final presentation before the Q&A. I would like to invite an industry viewpoint from Dr. Florian Gruschwitz. Great, I see you there, who is the Senior Business Development Manager at MAN Energy Solutions. Welcome to you, Dr. Gruschwitz. I hand the floor to you.
Yeah, thank you, Sarah, for this kind introduction, and thank you for having me. Can I see the presentation? Yeah, thank you. So yeah, we can already start with the first slide. So I want to start by giving you a short overview about the pillars of our business, which is to start with the marine division, especially propulsion system, diesel, gas, methanol, and other synthetic fuels that can be carbon neutral. I'll come to that in a moment. The energy and storage, the power segment, which means fully integrated energy solutions, worldwide EPC power plants since decades experience, and also very much now in the field of large-scale energy storage or hybrid power plants. And of course, the turbo part, turbo machinery in all sectors of industry, such as the chemical industry. Can we see the next slide, please? So in order to elaborate our perspective on green hydrogen and e-fuels with regard to decarbonization and energy transition, I hope I can also illustrate this by describing the e-fuel and hydrogen value chain of our portfolio. So you see the whole chain has to be taken into account, starting from the production with the PEM electrolyzers on the upper left side picture. In the next step, one power-to-X path can be a follow-up fuel, such as power to synthetic methane. And with regard of the full chain, of course, the infrastructure element as the hydrogen grids, as already elaborated in other presentations, is a central element, and with the respective compressor technology, which is also something in our technology field. This is fundamental. Also combined when it comes to decarbonization with carbon capture and storage, but this is of course not in the focus today. And to complete the value chain with one field of application, here are our engines and turbines that can be operated with carbon neutral fuels such as synthetic methane, methanol, or green ammonia to feature a future-proof portfolio. Can we see the next slide, please? Thank you. I think everybody can easily agree upon this proclamation. We need to ramp up and establish a hydrogen economy in Europe rapidly. Not only as a post-COVID recovery measure, but in a general context with an ever more competitive situation towards today's global economy with more and more strong players worldwide. This is our chance to solidify our position on the global scheme. So we have to act fast and we have to be the first mover here. We cannot wait to see other players to occupy our place on the world stage. In order to achieve our goals, we have to and we can utilize the strengths of the Union at all levels. So on the right side, I put some small pictures to describe that. So you can see the message. There are ambitious drives and plans everywhere and all levels. So for example, on regional level, such as in Germany, the Bavarian hydrogen strategy. Our company is headquartered in Augsburg, Bavaria, or in North Rhine-Westphalia, also having a hydrogen roadmap with context of their specific situation. But of course, also on the national level, like the German national hydrogen strategy, as well as other countries' hydrogen roadmaps, such as in France, Spain, Portugal, and so on. So we have to and can use this momentum at political, industrial, and society level to foster our role on the world market, but we also have to use this to effectively reach our climate goals and successfully make energy transition a reality, not just a plan. And another important topic when it comes to the energy carriers, green hydrogen, this has become quite clear, is the base for everything that cannot be electrified directly. So green hydrogen is one key element, and we need the infrastructure as described. Besides that, we also believe that further green fuels such as synthetic methane or other e-fuels are crucial complement as an element to effectively reach our climate goals. So you can see this is a broad range and we are more than intrigued to start with taking our part in a decarbonized Europe. Thank you very much.
Many thanks to you, and I wanted to thank all of our presenters and speakers for keeping to time, especially because now we actually have time for a Q&A, so I really appreciate that. I know everyone appreciates your input and the presentations you've given, which have opened up a lot. So I would like to first kick off the Q&A by turning to you, Ms. Bentele, because you've come to the studio, which is very kind of you. Thank you. And maybe get your reactions to what you've heard since, I mean, you've outlined the hydrogen strategy, but you've heard now from industry and you've heard more specifics about the challenges and also maybe specifically to this idea of a working group around regulation. Thank you.
Yeah, I think this point was also made very prominently by Jorgo Chazimarkakis. I think it's very important that we certify now hydrogen and that we set the standards, because if we Europeans now set the standards, then we will really create this this energy we need in this build-up of this economy. And this is very important that this comes very fast now. And I really like this idea to invite DEKRA because as a very trusted company also, although I know this mask is certified by DEKRA, and this also helps a lot to give confidence, because this was also mentioned by Joakim, the fueling stations where there have been accidents. So there is some concern about it, hydrogen. So if we step up now, standards, certification, if we prevent greenwashing, because this is also a concern, then I think this is a very important element to make this economy flow and prosper.
Okay, great.
And maybe also we need to, and I think every pragmatic person would agree to this, we need to use the existing infrastructure. Because there is some ideological also resistance to say we don't want to invest into fossil infrastructure anymore, but for a certain transition period, we need to make use of the existing infrastructure, the gas infrastructure. Since we heard it's only 15,000 kilometers of pure pipelines, hydrogen pipelines, we need to use the existing infrastructure. And if we create the security around this infrastructure, I think then we can really this hydrogen economy can really take off.
Great, thank you. No, I think those points are well reiterated here. And I wanted to ask the next question on the other side of that to Ruud Kempener. So I know he might be out there in Zoom land. So maybe if we can pull Ruud back up so I could ask him a question. We talked about that demand side, and I wanted to know if you could talk a bit about how we ensure the market for decarbonized hydrogen, if he's there.
Of course. Thank you very much.
Thank
you very much for the question as well. Yes, the demand side. I think, and this also links again back to this discussion about certification as well. I think it is clear for the Commission, but also from the discussions which are taking place in Parliament, that the scale-up of hydrogen is kind of a no-regret option. And we know those no-regret options. We know where, indeed, fossil-based hydrogen is consumed today. That leads to, depending on the production, to 80 million tons of CO2 production. It's an immediate no-regret option where we can pursue the scale-up of hydrogen and where we can learn already from that experience. If you look at the consumption of hydrogen today, it is actually a very, very small market, as in hydrogen is being traded among different people. There's a lot of hydrogen being consumed, there are a lot of contracts, but there's not a market for hydrogen as such yet. And there, of course, what one of the proposals is within the hydrogen strategy is to specifically look at that and say, okay, how can we ensure that we create a market for hydrogen, which has a couple of elements to it. A market, of course, which allows for competition, which is competitive. A market which allows for trade across the different borders, so that we can have, like I said before, standards being set, so that we can have trade and we can have a liquid market. And we need to have a market which allows for access for a lot of new players which are entering this, well, players which are already in this sphere, but also a lot of new players which are entering the sphere of hydrogen. I mean, I think the European Clean Hydrogen Alliance is exactly that example. Who would have thought that more than 1,000 people are entering, and companies and NGOs are entering the field of hydrogen a year and a half ago? So we need to make sure that all those people, and a lot of them with coming new ideas, that they are enabled to kind of access this market and provide these new technologies. And those technologies are not, I think, limited to the production of hydrogen, which is often kind of focused upon, but across the full chain. The production of hydrogen, the transport, the distribution of hydrogen, the storage of hydrogen, the dispatching of hydrogen to those end consumers, and then looking at the processes of those end consumers themselves. for the transport sector, fuel cells, but in the industry, there are a whole range of technologies now which are opening up, which could be used and could be introduced to replace those processes which are currently run on fossil fuels. Again, there, we are now working on a number of options which we're putting on the table. I think one of the other elements which I want to add to the discussion, that was also one of the comments which we heard, is that yes, we need to have a hydrogen market, but that hydrogen market needs to be connected. Hydrogen can be produced from electricity, so there is a direct link there, of course, with the electricity market. Hydrogen can be converted into methane. There's a direct link to the gas market. Hydrogen can be converted back into electricity if we're using it in terms of storage and buffering. So we have to make sure that those markets work along each other, that we have the most efficient kind of exchanges on transfers of one energy carrier to the other energy carrier possible across the different producers and consumers.
Great, thank you. I think part of your response could be picked up in a couple of the other questions that I had. The first is for Joakim Wikeby. So basically, you know, you had referred to the fact that physics is physics, right? So if physics are the same in every country, wouldn't national standards lead to the same results? It's kind of asking about the justification of the EU harmonization of standards.
Yeah, I think harmonization of the standards is crucial, of course. I mean, it's because also having different standards in different countries, and this is the beauty with the EU actually to work on such topics, but to have these kind of different targets and standards in our different member states, it's creating, I would say uncertainty and potentially also safety issues, because the companies that are working with these kind of projects, they need to have all these local regulations in mind when working on this. And I think I think they're just referring back to you, Sarah. Physics is physics, and then we should be able to harmonize this, because and to have a joint approach across EU or across Europe actually on this standard when it comes to H2 inside pipelines. I would say, again, to clarify what we are talking about here.
Great. Okay. Thank you. I wanted to ask also a question coming in for Dr. Gruschwitz. Yeah. So you highlighted e-fuels such as synthetic methane, and I know that Ruud mentioned this again, the importance of linking these different pipelines. And if e-fuels can be used with today's combustion engines, and in particular to integrate all energy sectors, why do we still need hydrogen pipeline networks?
Yeah, thank you. That's also a very, very good question. I refer to e-fuels like synthetic methane as also, I think Ruud also elaborated, as a complement and not an alternative to green hydrogen direct use. So we still need, of course, green hydrogen, especially you need green hydrogen to produce synthetic methane. With regard to decarbonization, for example, you can use biogenous CO2 as a feedstock for methanation, and this will allow 100% carbon neutrality along the whole value chain. Or you can use the CO2 from hard-to-abate point sources, such as cement factories or waste incineration, to at least use the CO2 twice. So with all the green hydrogen, I think the imperative above it is the decarbonization. So this is one very effective measure. And the strong point is that sectors that can be decarbonized, that are hard or impossible to be addressed by electrification or by hydrogen direct use today on a midterm or longer term perspective. So everything where you can use green hydrogen directly, please do so, because obviously it's better than to take this extra route. But as soon as you're not able to address it, this is a very effective way to use the existing infrastructures. So one example for that, as said earlier, shipping fuels with synthetic methane, you can reach 100% carbon neutrality with today's assets and infrastructure. And even in HFO powered ship, so heavy fuel oil diesel, which are more than 90% on the ships on the world seas today, can be effortlessly converted into synthetic natural gas operations. So this is a strong point. So the important factor is the existing infrastructures that can be used without any modification. And you only need to use this power to gas production element and can start decarbonizing instantly as parallel to the buildup of the hydrogen grid structure, but also in some niche sectors or for the shipping industry, that can be a valid additional option to reduce the amount of carbon that is released to the atmosphere. So again, as an addition and as a transition.
Great, thank you. I think, Jorgo, did you want to come in? I saw that you might want to comment as well.
Absolutely, and I would like to pick up what Florian just said about using existing infrastructure. First of all, what you mentioned, Florian, the CO2 and the origin of CO2 alludes to another very important certification, the one of CO2. So if we go for synthetic fuels like methanol or any e-kerosene, e-diesel, and e-kerosene is needed in aviation, we need to know where the CO2 comes from. Because if it is fossil CO2, it should be not admissible for and eligible for the use in synthetic fuels, because we don't win anything. But if it's waste from bio waste, or if it's from incineration, as you just said, then it changes dramatically the value of this CO2 for the use in combination with renewable hydrogen for the use in synthetic fuels. So that's another task that DEKRA might look into. That's certification schemes, not only for hydrogen, but also for CO2. It becomes very, very urgent. Hildegard alluded to ideology. And here I would like to link this to a concrete example. I know what Hildegard is referring to. It's there have been some members in the European Parliament saying, don't invest into pipelines, it's devil, it's fossil, it's bad. The opposite is the case. Let me take one example. The hottest spot in the Netherlands that produces CO2 is the Port of Rotterdam. Port of Rotterdam stands for nearly 1/3 of all the CO2 emissions of the whole country. Why? Because there are a lot of refineries there, and there's a lot of industrial production there. Now, what did we do there? In Rotterdam, 2 weeks ago, Shell produced e-kerosene. So they took hydrogen from renewable source, they took CO2 from bio-waste, from slaughterhouse waste, and they produced e-kerosene. And the first KLM Air France flight will take off, I think, next week with this, and will fly zero emission. Now, there is a pipeline from the Port of Rotterdam to Amsterdam Schiphol, understandable, with e-kerosene, to Düsseldorf Airport and to Frankfurt Airport. So from Rotterdam, you can fuel 3 of the main airports in Europe and can deliver zero emission fuel. So I would love to discuss that with your colleagues, Hildegard, possibly in the Green Group. Why is it bad to use this pipeline and to have zero emission aviation? So at least for a transition period until we can fly with hydrogen, that's also possible. But why don't we use then this? And there are people who say, yeah, that's not efficient. Why on earth should we not start to think about system efficiency, also cost efficiency? Because renewables are the source. There's the endlessness of renewables. So you don't need to achieve 90, 80%. You need to achieve a cost and a system efficiency. And that you have here in that system, driving our whole economy towards zero emission. Hildegard, I'm married to an MEP from the Green Group. We are not Greens, we are ecological guys, but a member of the Green Group. So I know exactly what you mean. Stay clear and stay clearer against ideology and in favor of rational solutions that help us all, that help the whole society. Ideology is a bad advisor. Thank you.
No worries.
Thanks to you. Does anyone else want to comment before I wrap up? Because the hour is quickly pass, and I know there were many more questions which will be answered in writing, so thank you all for the participation via the chat and the questions, and thank you all to the panelists. Does anyone have a final comment? No, okay, well, if you're fine, then I thank you again, but I think we've heard...
One short comment, Sarah, one short comment. DEKRA is definitely invited to be part of this European Clean Hydrogen Alliance, but we also would invite DEKRA to lead all the certification aspects and working groups within Hydrogen Europe. So feel welcome to come over and to lead. Thank you.
Wow.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I mean, I was going to sum up, but I don't need to. I think we've heard a lot about justification of the certification and safety regulation, and looked specifically at what potential next steps are in this area, in line with hearing about the hydrogen strategy in the next phases, both on the supply and the demand side. So thank you all. It's a continuing discussion. And thank you to DEKRA for hosting this meeting. And we look forward to following up with you via the questions and in further discussions.